are you all? I hope you're all keeping very well. Welcome to the sixth in our series of reflections from the Woodpile, where we've been exploring the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew's Gospel. In our first reflection, we looked at the Beatitudes and how they invite us to encounter what is of true value, the expansive love and generosity of God. In the second one, we explored how we truly live as salt and light as we live in relationship with God and allow that relationship to transform us into people of hope and life, people of the kingdom of God. In the third, we thought about how to fulfill the law and how the passages ask us to love God with all of who we are and love our neighbours sacrificially and generously. And in the fourth, we looked at anger and how we understand the depth of God's grace to us and his forgiveness of us, that we are moved to forgive others and move from anger to love. In our last reflection, we explored Matthew 5, verse 27 to 32, where Jesus asks us to live with generous love towards others, and he speaks about the destructiveness of sin in our lives, how it distorts our view of people, God, and ourselves, and how with God we should turn towards God. In the next few verses, Matthew 5, 33 to 37, Jesus talks about oaths, or when someone swears on something. All the passages we have looked at so far have something to say to who we are, to our character and our integrity. And this one is no different. Let me read Matthew 5, verse 33 to 37 for us. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn." But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. This passage seems pretty straightforward. Instead of swearing oaths and making promises and sticking to them, or not, as the case may be, if you say yes to something, do it. If you say no to something, well, don't do it. And if you do change your mind, explain why. It's kind of simple. But as always, with what Jesus says, there's a few more things happening than this. Jesus talks about a couple of different kinds of oaths that people might take. They may swear by heaven, or a common one at the time was, "May I never see Jerusalem again if." Or people may swear by their hair, "May my hair turn white if." It was common at the time to have two different kinds of oaths. One was binding and the other absolutely was not. One that held the name of God was absolutely binding, and one that didn't really wasn't. Like, by heaven, or "May I never see Jerusalem again." They were not binding oaths. The belief was that if God's name was used in the oath, then God became a partner in the transaction, whatever that transaction might be, making it really important to keep. The other oath, people felt quite free to break. So what Jesus is saying here is that God cannot be compartmentalized. Just because his name was not used does not mean that God is not in the exchange, because God is in everything. Jesus points to this in what he says. You swear by the throne of heaven. Well, God is there. You swear by Jerusalem. Well, God is there. You swear by the hair on your head. Well, it belongs to God. You can't make it change colour unless you use dye and stuff, but you know what I mean. So in this instance, in whatever you say, God is there. So recognize that any promise or oath is sworn with God as part of it. The ones on heaven and the ones in Jerusalem, they all have God as part of it. But they had created a divide between their own world and God. But the reality is, and still is, that God is in everything and there is no divide. I think that's a real challenge for us too. Where do we take God out of the equation? What parts of our world do we think, well, God isn't in this? And where do we have to recognize that actually God really is? What are those things that we do where we think, well, this doesn't matter to God, or this God isn't in this matter? Where do we have to recognize that God actually is there? In realizing this, we recognize that we are bearers of the image of God, that if we trust him, we are kingdom people, that God dwells inside us. And if that is so, then what we do and what we say is intimately connected to the God of the universe, the God who created us, the God who loves us and who died for us. So then, let your yes be yes and your no be no. At times, we will make mistakes, but life with God asks us to own those mistakes and turn back to him, allowing him to shape who we are and how we live in the world, building lives of integrity based on intimacy with Jesus. Jesus' statement asks that we allow God to shape us so that when we say yes or we say no, people will know that we mean what we say, that we will have considered all the options, that we will have looked to love people and love God in our answer, that we will be fair and we will do what we say, and we will have allowed God to shape us and our actions. This is a process. And like I said before, one where we will get it wrong. But owning and learning from those mistakes is part of developing character in a way that is godly and shares God with people. In this way, we invite people to taste and see that God, that his kingdom, the kingdom of God, is good, full of hope, full of forgiveness, and full of love.